j'ouvre maintenant la séance.
Hello, everyone. I call this meeting to order, meeting 28 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Canadian Heritage. I would like to acknowledge that this meeting is taking place on the unceded traditional territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people.
Thursday, May the 12th, 2022, this committee's meeting on the study of Bill C-11, an act to amend the Broadcasting Act and to make related and consequential amendments to all acts. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format, and actually members are attending in the room must wear masks according to the House of Commons Board of Internal Economy's orders of March the 10th. Those on Zoom or virtual, please note that at the bottom of your screen there is a globe icon, and that is for interpretation. You may choose what interpretation that you're going to need. And those on the floor, you know that you can actually plug in and receive interpretation from the room itself. No photographs are meant to be taken during this meeting. And again, I would like to make comments for the benefits of witnesses and members. Please wait until I recognize you by name before speaking. For those participating in video conference, click on the microphone icon to speak, and then mute yourself after you finish speaking. For those on Zoom, you know the choice below at the bottom of your screen. Again, for interpretation and in order to speak, you can mute or unmute yourself as needed. Today, we have our first hour of meeting. We have one organization, and it is the Canadian Radio, Television and Telecommunications Commission. Present for this group will be Ian Scott, Chairperson and Chief Executive Director, Scott Hutton, Chief of Consumer Research and Communications, Sheena Carter, who's Director General of Strategy and Policy, and Rachel Frenette, General Counsel and Deputy Executive Director. So how we run this, CRTC is very well aware because they've been here before, is that the actual commission will have 5 minutes to present, and then there will be a question and answer from the floor, and then you may be able to elaborate or answer any questions that are asked of you in a segment beginning with 6 minutes. But right now, Mr. Scott, you may begin for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, members of the committee. I'll forego the introductions. You've identified my colleagues and move right to it. We are pleased to appear before the committee, specifically this time to speak about the need for Bill C-11, la modernisation de la loi de radiodiffusion au Canada.
The modernization of Canada's Broadcasting Act is long overdue. Created in the early 90s, this act was a product of its time. It fostered the creation of a series of tools that were adapted for the public policy goals of the day, namely to protect and encourage the development of Canada's broadcasting system. In the walled garden the system created, Canadian films, music, and television programs were given the opportunity to flourish. I don't have to tell you how that reality has changed with the internet technology. Those goals supported by the Broadcasting Act and the tools it created became less relevant as internet technology embedded itself deeper into the homes and onto the phones of Canadians on a daily basis. As regulators of the broadcasting system, we paid close attention to these changes. We judged these changes were complementary rather than detrimental to Canada's broadcasting system, while we continue to keep a close eye on the trends and innovations those technologies created.
Changes to the system, giving Canadians a welcome ability to consume content, new content in new ways. Digital platforms have created and continue to create opportunities for Canadian artists and content producers, but also challenges, particularly for traditional media. In 2018, at the request of government, we conducted an in-depth study of the environment and issued our report called Harnessing Change. In it, we laid bare a simple truth. Canadians will rely increasingly on the internet to discover and consume music, entertainment, news, and other information in the coming years. Our report therefore recommended that future policy approaches should focus on the production and promotion of high-quality content made by Canadians that can be discovered by audiences in Canada and abroad, should ensure that all players benefiting from the Canadian broadcasting system participate in an appropriate and equitable manner, and be sufficiently nimble to enable the regulator to adapt rapidly to changes in technology and consumer demand. We made similar recommendations to the Broadcasting and Telecommunications Legislative Review Panel, all of which brings us to C11, which the CRTC views as a much-needed piece of legislation. More effective tools, such as those proposed in C11, are needed to ensure Canadian stories and music can be enjoyed by audiences in Canada and across the globe. In our view, the bill proposes three very important things. Premièrement, le projet de séance.
First, C11 builds on the existing Broadcasting Act to clarify the CRTC's jurisdiction regarding online broadcasters. It would give the CRTC new regulatory powers to deal with online broadcasting services, including non-Canadian ones. Secondly, it would give us a more flexible approach to regulation. The current Broadcasting Act does not specify how traditional players in the Canadian broadcasting system must contribute to the Act's policy objectives. Bill C11 would allow us to make that determination as it regards online broadcasters and put in place the regulatory frameworks to support these goals. Finally, it would modernize the CRTC's enforcement powers. Although the Telecommunications Act allows us to impose administrative monetary penalties to address non-compliance, no such provisions exist in the Broadcasting Act.
For modernization of the Broadcasting Act has only become more urgent, and I will stop there and invite questions from the members. Merci beaucoup. Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Scott. And I will now go to the first round. That would be for 6 minutes, and it will be the Conservatives. I do not have the name of the Conservative member who will be opening this.
Madam Chair, it's John Nader here. It's going to be Mr. Waugh for the first round. But before we go to his questions, could I just seek some clarity? The notice of motion says that this part of the meeting will end at 7:30. So just seeking clarity from the chair in terms of how long this portion with the CRTC will go for.
I was told that this was a 2-hour meeting, and so with my math, shaky as it is, I would think if we began at 7:05, we will end at 9:05.
Rappel au règlement, Madame la Présidente, s'il vous plaît.
Clarification from the clerk on that.
Point of order, please, Madam Chair.
Un rappel au règlement.
A point of order. Madam Chair, I wanted to ask the clerk this question, given that, according to the information that I got, we had to let staff leave at 8:30. Is my information correct?
We've been told not to change the hours on notice for the services, so we keep it from 6:30 to 8:30, but we have a full 2 hours from the time that we start. So given that we started at, I think I had what the time the chair said, we have 2 hours from that time for the meeting. So my understanding was an hour for the first panel and 45 minutes for the second panel, but I will seek clarification from the committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think that Madam Clerk, we're very clear. I would like to know the exact time of starting. I thought that it was 7:05, but I may be wrong.
The time that I had was 7:12, Madam Chair.
Thank you. So we will have 2 hours from 7:12. Thank you. Continue, Mr. Nader.
Mr. Waugh, actually. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, Kevin. Go ahead.
Well, thank you,
For
Madam.
6 minutes.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, and welcome again. It seems like just an hour ago we saw you.
Just yesterday.
Well, actually, an hour ago when we left here. So, Mr. Scott, I think we all agree the Broadcasting Act needs modernization. I mean, I think everybody. I mean, we've talked 20 hours here this week, and there isn't anyone that agrees it does need to be modernized. There are differing views. Your thoughts on the differing views that you've heard from people in the business, the regular, if you don't mind me saying, the regular broadcast industry, and those that are the new ones that are coming on streaming, YouTube, and are making a living on that, because there seems to be a clash where the old broadcasters have their way, and now you have the new, if you don't mind me saying, the new generation, they're streaming. And so I just want you to clarify in your mind, the CRTC's mind, because let's face it, for 53 years, you actually dealt with just the broadcasting. Now you're being asked to deal with the streaming. Although I think you should have also been looking after the streaming, which you decided not to do. Am I correct on that?
On the last point, the Commission looked at it at various times in the past, the last time in detail almost a decade ago. And at that time, the impact of broadcasting being delivered via the internet did not have as significant an impact on the broadcasting system as it clearly does today. It's an interesting question you pose. I suppose the simple answer is regulation is not always welcome. By parties. There are groups today that are subject to regulation and have obligations. If you will, they operated in a walled garden in the past, and the walls have disappeared. The new players have entered. They were not subject to similar regulatory obligations, and what is on the table now is that we should find a regulatory framework that treats all of those who are engaged in broadcasting be subject to an equitable broadcasting regime. So that's fair to all.
Yeah. So what you're saying then is YouTube, you consider to be a broadcaster?
Depends what YouTube is doing. If they're engaged in broadcasting, then we will be interested. If they're engaged in other activities, no, then not. We're concerned with broadcasting.
And define broadcasting.
It's a discussion. I mean, I can go. One of your members, we had this discussion very briefly. I didn't get a chance to answer. As I started to say last time, it is defined in the Act. Specifically, if you wish me to read the definition, transmission of programs, regardless of whether the transmission is scheduled or on demand, and whether the programs are encrypted or not, by radio waves or other means of telecommunications for reception by the public by means of broadcasting receiving apparatus, but does not include any such transmission of programs that is made solely for performance or display in a public place. And that is held over from the current Broadcasting Act.
So did anyone from the public office reach out to you or anybody on your the table there within the last 2 weeks about this bill, C11?
Sorry, I didn't hear the question clearly.
From the minister's office?
No, I have not spoken to anyone from the minister's office.
Okay, from the meeting from May 24th?
No, I have not.
Okay. Where do you see this bill? You're leaving, and the timing isn't good, if you don't mind me saying it, that you're leaving, and we don't have anything. You've got the 5-year agreement, you're gone in September, and they're already advertising for your job.
Well, it does take some time to find a suitably qualified person.
Tell me who's qualified for this job.
That I think that's in the hands of others, but I would identify some of perhaps the challenges that lay ahead for the Commission. and at least with respect to the chair position in particular, I think the ability to manage change is important, and I think leadership and a ability to try and build consensus among members are two of the key critical skills that a new chair would require.
Yeah, I mentioned it because the old broadcasting is changed. And like when I look at the head of the CRTC, it needs, and it's very difficult right now with the internet and with everything going on with C11 and then 18, which I talked to you about last time in May 24th. I don't know what that person looks like. And do you make any recommendations to the minister or anyone in your department make a recommendation? Because this new chair of the CRTC will be visionary. Not that you weren't, but this one, if you don't mind me saying, will have to have a little more on the plate to deal with the internet situation and the YouTube and all that we've been talking about here for the last 6 months. It will be a difficult position to fill.
To answer quickly, I have not been asked for my advice. Is a short answer, and you are correct that, and I think that's what I mean when I talk about change management. But I would remind you that there is an expert staff and 8 other commissioners that will be involved in any future decisions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. Thank you, Mr. Waugh. And the next one for the Liberals is Chris Biddle. Chris, 6 minutes, please.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. Mr. Scott, to clarify comments a few weeks ago at committee, you said that Section 4.2 would give the CRTC the power to regulate user-generated content. What did you mean by the term regulate?
Thank you. A significant discussion today. Let me take one step back and I think hopefully help clarify it. And I have legal counsel with me from the Commission today, and I will ask her to add in a moment. So first, let's be clear. Section 2.1 of the Act is very clear, and basically I'm going to paraphrase and say it simply states that users are not subject to the Act, period. Point final, it's very clear. 4.2 allows the CRTC to prescribe by regulation user-uploaded content subject to very explicit criteria. That is also in the Act. Those are, that's a simple explanation. And if I can, I'm going to turn to Madame Frenette because she will add what we can't do still, if you would, please.
Yes, of course. So, as the chairman explained, user-uploaded content can be the subject of some authority by the Commission. But contrary to what many have suggested, the Commission's powers in relation to social media platforms and user-uploaded content are actually quite narrow. For example, rules on the proportion of Canadian programs, French language programming, and programs devoted to specific genres cannot be imposed on user-uploaded content. The CRTC is also prohibited from imposing any rules regarding standards of program on user-uploaded content. So the way in which the Commission actually exercises its powers vis-à-vis user-uploaded content is quite narrow.
Thank you. Has the CRTC ever regulated actual broadcast content, what is said or what is seen, rather than just its distribution?
No. Obviously attempt to ensure that the objectives of the Broadcasting Act are met. We don't regulate individuals, we regulate broadcasting undertakings, and they abide by a regulatory framework that we establish. We don't dictate content, neither what's broadcast nor what is watched, obviously, by Canadians.
Can you then quickly respond to what some of our critics said, that you will control what Canadians see or hear online and censor unacceptable views online?
We will not.
In C11, the concept of programming control is key. Per Section 2, sub 2.2, social media services do not exercise programming control over content uploaded by everyday users and creators. Section 9.1, sub 6 goes on to exclude powers that do not make sense in this context, such as the proportion of French language programs. Section 10 sub 1 sub C says the CRTC cannot make standards about these programs. So this means content uploaded by everyday users and creators could not be regulated for things like obscenity, portrayal of violence, or any other issue relating to the content itself. Is that fair to say?
I believe so. And Madam Fournette, did you have anything to add? I think that's correct.
Yes, thank you for your question. I think that perfectly encapsulates the limits of the CRTC's powers with respect to user uploaded content.
So, as a follow-up, does this mean the CRTC could not actually regulate the content itself, regulating what is depicted, said, expressed when we were talking about user-generated content?
Correct.
Madam Chair, how much time do I have?
You have 2 minutes and 5
wow.
seconds, Mr. Bill.
Excellent.
You can give it to another party.
I appreciate Mr. Julian and his enthusiasm, but I will keep going. Critics of C11 have said that it will give CRTC sweeping powers to regulate the global internet from every large platform to every single user and what they post. Could you describe all the elements of the bill that scope and constrain the CRTC's powers?
I think, Madame, between your description that we confirmed and Madame Fournette's earlier answer, perhaps that's already been answered, but maybe to turn it around a little bit, that's not what the regulatory framework is designed to do. We are not looking to regulate individuals or the content generated by individuals. We regulate undertakings. We regulate enterprises and apply a set of rules that are designed to achieve the objectives of the Act. And we would do so, it will be expanded to include other enterprises, but the objectives will remain the same, and the regulatory framework should apply equitably to all players.
How would you respond? There seems to be from the critics this belief that there's this nefarious plot for the CRTC to engage in censorship and overregulation and to the point of absurdity. I was wondering how you would respond to critics that claim this to be what's going to happen.
I think I responded last time and probably in other public fora. We've been regulating broadcasting for over 50 years. We haven't done it to date. We won't do it in the future.
So if things are scoped out...
16 seconds, Chris.
Oh, okay. Well, at 16 seconds, I will just have to be like Mr. Julian and say thank you and give my final comments and say thank you very much for being here and being so patient. It was inappropriate that you had to sit here for that long and wait to testify, but I appreciate it.
Thank you, Chris. And we now go to the Bloc Québécois, Martin Champoux. For 6 minutes, please, Mr. Champoux.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to tell you, Madam Chair, that you have the right of not raising your hand when you wish to speak. You can speak without raising your hand. It's your privilege. So I would like to repeat what my colleague said.
I am sorry.
Je réitère.
I'd like to repeat what my colleague had said. Thank you for having made yourself available to stay. Your presence is greatly appreciated. I'm a visual person, and I need to have a few things explained to me. So maybe I'll ask Madame Frémette the question directly, if you allow me, Mr. Scott, because you explained the thin leeway that CRTC has in terms of content generated by social media users. Did you follow the evidence given by witnesses that we heard earlier? So technocurs and YouTubers, did you hear their evidence? Yes. So if we take the case of Mrs. Ruby Roy, who was here earlier today, and who is someone who creates skateboarding videos and who's a good ambassador for her activities, could the CRTC regulate the activities of a YouTuber or TikToker like her? No, a user using a social media platform is not subject to the Commission's jurisdiction. The Commission needs to impose certain rules, but that's on the platform, not on the user. So would the user be penalized? Does the user feel the impact of the regulation that's applied to the platform? How can we assure those people? Because that's their main concern with this bill. They're saying that the regulations that would be put in place will prevent us from performing because of algorithms which will place us further down the line. You've heard them speak. So how can we reassure them? So a priori, the Commission does not have the power of regulating algorithms. This is very clear in the bill text. Secondly, the leeway that the CRTC has in terms of regulation affecting the proportion of broadcasting of French language of Canadian content does not apply to social media platforms. So YouTubers, the users of these services, have nothing to fear in terms of the legal authority of the CRTC. Just to add, all the regulation, the involvement of the Commission in broadcasting, and that's the goal of the CRTC, will be carried out after public hearings where we will hear about the risks and all the possibilities of the actions that can be taken by the Commission, and they will be considered by the members of the Commission, the 9 members, and so you've raised 2 points, Madame Frenette. You're saying that CRTC does not have the power to play in algorithms, so programming and deprogramming algorithms is a function of the regulations you're putting in place. But some people say to the contrary, we should not remove the power of the CRTC using algorithms in order to realize the objectives that are intended. What do you think of that? The Commission's objective is not the regulation of algorithms. It's to ensure that the objectives of the law be delivered and throughout the broadcasting system. For us, is to put in place a regime which will see that there is a promotion of Canadian content, that there is support for the development, the creation of Canadian content, objectives of that nature, and not involvement in trying to analyze algorithms. So there's no, you're not going to be playing with the order of how things are presented to the users. So, Mr. Scott, I will address you. You talked about succession, and I will ask you a question that I asked the Minister in the House. So the call for candidates for someone to succeed you says that knowledge of the 2 official languages would be preferable. So you'd know what my opinion is in that matter. But what do you think of that? Would it be all right that the chair of the CRTC does not speak both official languages? Well, it's always my responsibility as a president of the Commission to participate in all meetings in both languages with all of our staff members. They can speak to me in French or in English. It's always their choice. All our meetings are carried out in both languages. So I had some.
Elaborate on that with the next questioner, who is going to be the NDP, Peter Julian, for 6 minutes. Peter.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and I'd like to apologize to our witnesses as well. I mean, we wanted to have you come forward to answer these questions, and for the life of me, I can't understand a member of Parliament that would block public officials from answering questions of a parliamentary committee. It just doesn't make sense. So appreciate your patience and the fact that you waited more than 2 hours to answer our questions. And I wanted to start off with you, Mr. Scott. You said in your testimony on May 18th, we have never interfered in individual content. You also referenced that under the Broadcasting Act, we could do any of these things today. And speaking of user-generated content, we could do any of those things today under the Broadcasting Act, and also referenced as constructed, there is a provision that would allow us to put in place regulations. I think that's filling in your comment, to do as required in C11. So my question is, since you've never interfered in individual content, even though you believe you have those the ability to do those things under the Broadcasting Act, what might have changed in C11? Or do you see it as a similar situation where the CRTC would not choose to use any of the powers given to it?
I think it's both, with respect, and my colleagues may join me. So you made reference, and I was referring to 4.2, not by specific reference when we talked about the CRTC's ability to prescribe by regulation user-uploaded content. So it's very limited, as my legal colleague has explained. There was no 2.1 as exists in C11 in the Broadcasting Act as it exists today. So there was, what I was really responding to, I'm trying to put it more clearly, is when the discussion takes place that says we are encroaching in new areas, that the legislation gives us new powers. The point was that we have had jurisdiction over broadcasting, that broad definition that I read earlier, always. And it has not been used in a detailed way. We've used an exemption provision. And now there are specific provisions in C11 that says users are not, the Act does not apply to users, and then circumscribes where user-uploaded content could be subject to any regulation.
Are you saying that C11 is more restrictive of the CRTC than the Broadcasting Act?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. I'd like to...
Maybe I should have just said that at the beginning. It would have been easier and not used up your time. Pardon me.
No, that's fine. Thank you. That's a good clarification. Now, Ms. Frenette, you just mentioned that there's a narrow scope in terms of user-generated content. You talked about all of the areas where the CRTC could not put into place regulations. But could you tell us where that narrow scope is? What is the CRTC able to do or has the ability to do?
Thank you for your question. I can perhaps provide you with a few examples. The Commission could, for example, issue certain rules with respect to discoverability, could perhaps issue rules with respect to respond to certain concerns on accessibility. But again, I think it's important to remember that to the extent that the Commission exercises those powers, they can only apply on broadcasting undertakings. And users of social media aren't broadcasting undertakings.
So coming back to that definition that you provided earlier, Mr. Scott, that broadcasting is transmission of programs, but does not include not for performance or display doesn't include those for performance or display in a public place. You're saying that user-generated content is excluded on that basis as well as on the sections that specifically excluded as well?
Yes.
2.1?
That's right.
Okay. Okay. I have a couple of minutes left, so I'm going to go to a couple of issues that have come up during our hearings. First is the slowness. This has been raised by a number of witnesses of the CRTC being able to make decisions when it comes to broadcasting currently. So how would you respond to that concern that people have raised, giving powers to the CRTC? In many respects, the CRTC has been very slow in a number of decisions that are pretty critical in the industry.
I think it's fair to point to some decisions that have been slower than parties would like. And there are usually reasons for that. The CBC license renewal has been pointed to. It's been almost a decade since the CBC license was examined. And it was a very elaborate, in-depth, and large proceeding. And it has taken longer than I would have liked. But it is what it is if you're going to act, abide by principles of administrative law and fairness. I would also say, though, importantly, that we issue about 400 decisions and orders a year. And people are pointing to a handful, to 2 or 3 processes that are taking longer. So I actually would sort of contest the premise of the question.
But people are raising concerns
Yes.
about how the CRTC is
And I
going
would
to deal
answer
with
that
it.
in general, we are timely and efficient. And where we're not, there is good reason, and it's usually because they are complex issues, and we're building the record upon which to make a decision in the public interest.
Thank you. That time is up, Peter. Please, can we mute the floor? Thank you. The time is up, Peter, and I'm going to go to the second round, which is a 5-minute round. And I do not have a name for the Conservative speaker. So if you can please let me know who that is.
It's John Nader here.
Yeah, John, go for 5 minutes. Thank you.
Time. Again, thank you to our witnesses for joining us. I don't want to speculate, but I think my colleague, Mr. Waugh, might be in the running for the new CRTC chair. I've been hearing that rumor, and I think if it's repeated enough, it's may.
That or the young gentleman who appeared earlier today. I'm guessing with a little rounding off, he's a candidate.
Mr. Wyatt Sharp would be a great suggestion as well. But I want to start off. Obviously the CRTC is constrained and is directed by a couple of different things. One of them being legislation itself. The second being policy directives from the minister. I want to start by confirming that you have not yet been given a policy directive on C11. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Now, in the previous incarnation of this bill, C10, there was a policy directive that was released, at least a draft version, prior to C10 being passed. Obviously not at royal assent, but that was done. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So when you're given this piece of legislation, we are at this point, from a parliamentarian standpoint, providing you with powers that will be further refined, for lack of a better word, by a directive from the minister. Is that correct?
Certain priorities. I mean, there are obviously parameters. We are an arm's length adjudicative body, and there are limits. But yes, the government of the day has the ability to issue a policy direction to the commission, as you described.
So one of those issues that may be contained and would like to be contained within that would be the concept of discoverability. Would that be a good assumption?
To be honest, I think it would be presumptuous of me to guess what the minister and the government might issue in terms of a policy direction.
I would back up a step then. So if there is no mention of discoverability within a policy directive, how would you interpret that when you're coming to draft regulations? How would you implement discoverability for an online streamer?
As my colleague, Mr. Hutton, responded to Mr. Champoux before, as we do today, it would obviously apply to a larger group, but it's really about outcomes. What we're focused on are outcomes, and in that case, what we're trying to assure is that Canadians can find Canadian content. And let's be clear, today, the platforms we're talking about are also doing that. Netflix identifies Canadian content, Prime does, Spotify does in the audio area, YouTube does, and compensates artists. So this isn't new. And we would continue to do that, and we would be focused on ensuring that Canadians can find Canadian stories and content.
So there is a possibility then that the CRTC could just step back altogether when it comes to the concept of discoverability and leave it as it is now? If the
Yes,
platforms are already...
it's a bit vague, and I can't predict what the commission would do. But what I would say is what we do is pursue. I've described it as, the alternate version of what are the objectives of the Broadcasting Act. Make sure those Canadian stories are told, that they're distributed, that they're discoverable. So, yes, we will continue to do that.
So you mentioned about outcomes. Does the CRTC have the ability to regulate outcomes?
We have the ability to identify what are desired outcomes, and then I hope in the future to use as much as possible incentives rather than prescription. If you go back to the Harnessing Change report, it's one of the key elements of that report. We need to be adaptable. We need to recognize that different players have different business models. We need to find an equitable framework, but not an identical one. And we need to try and incentivize behavior that is positive for producers and digital content producers and traditional producers alike.
So I guess my question is, if our outcome, we want to have Canadian content, stories being told by Canadians available to Canadians, how do you get to that outcome in a meaningful way? How do you, for lack of a better word, force people to have Canadian content available?
Well, my answer, as I said a minute ago, preferably by incentives. So, but as I said, they're doing it, and they have good reason to do so. If you take Netflix as an example, or Crave, it doesn't, whether it's a foreign or Canadian producer, they want people to watch programming. And Canadian programming is popular, they will identify it. And we will persist in asking them to make sure Canadians can find that content. That doesn't make anybody watch it, it makes sure people can find it.
And how much of that
Thank you very much. You have 8 seconds, John. So I think we could finish that round, and I will move on.
In my 8 seconds, I'll say thank you as well for the discussion. I'm sure we can follow up another time. Thank you.
For the Liberals, Mr. Coteau for 5 minutes.
Thank you so much for being here. I got a quick question. Have you read the charter statement?
Yes, we have, and Council actually reviewed it today.
Okay, great. And can you just maybe give us your, Council, give us your thoughts on it, and does it contradict anything you do as an organization?
I'll ask Council to respond, please.
So my understanding of the charter statement that was issued by the Department of Justice, it set out that programs that are uploaded by an unaffiliated user of social media would not be subject to the Act unless prescribed by regulation. In deciding to prescribe such regulation, the statement then goes on to list the number of factors that are set out in Bill C-11. So it would appear that the Department of Justice charter statement did in fact have these provisions within their contemplation when they made the statement that Bill C-11 is charter compliant.
Okay. Another question. There's been a lot of discussion, about the bill, how it, what it means for YouTube, TikTok, Netflix, and other platforms. While C-11 directs you to respect the different way these platforms operate, the Act is fundamentally technology neutral and platform agnostic. Can you tell us what that means to you?
What it means, well, again, it's not an interest in the user uploaded content, but rather the behavior and actions of the platform itself. So just as today we encourage licensees through conditions of license to do certain things, we would potentially ask them, use the discoverability example, to take measures to ensure that Canadians can find Canadian stories. That would be an example.
It's that simple.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate it. I'm going to pass it over to my colleague.
Thank you very much, Mr. Coteau, and thank you.
Yes, Ms. Hepner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And through you, I would like to thank the witnesses as well for being here today. And so I think so far today we've established that Orby Roy will not have to send her skateboarding videos to you to be approved before she can post them online. And I thank you for that clarification. And I would like to ask you a little bit more about discoverability. We've also heard from detractors that making Canadian content more discoverable will take away people's ability to find other things online. And so if they're being directed to Canadian content, they won't find the things they really want to watch. So I'm wondering if you can address that.
To be honest, I find the statement kind of confusing. Today, there is a plethora of content available to Canadians, whether foreign or domestic, whether it is on a subscription service or through YouTube or simply searching on the internet. People will find the content they wish to watch. What we're talking about in the context of discoverability is take measures that are reasonable to help Canadians find Canadian stories. Just as you can put in, I'm interested in mysteries, if you're watching Netflix, and then you'll get choices of mysteries. then you ought to be able to easily find Canadian stories. I don't think it takes away choice or confuses consumers. They're sophisticated. They're looking for the kind of programming they want. We just want to make sure that Canadians, when they want, can find Canadian stories.
And we know that the platforms, their algorithms are a key part of their value proposition. Are you going to tell the platforms how to make Canadian content discoverable?
I can't say, the short answer is no, that's not how we do it. Again, I'll go back. I'm sorry, I'm repeating myself. It's about outcomes. So what I would imagine we might say is, great, Netflix, you're already doing this. Can you do it more? Can you do it better? Can you help Canadians find Canadian stories? That's the kind of regulation, that's the kind of approach the Commission would typically take. Commission staff will have proceedings, will develop recommendations, members will decide in the future. But that's generally what we're trying to do and the way we do it. We don't want to prescribe rules. We want to incentivize and allow for certain outcomes to happen. And that would be one of them.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. Ms. Hepner, your time is now up. And I will now go to Mr. Champoux for 2.5 minutes. And Mr. Julian will end this round because we're coming to the end of the hour. Thank you.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This last segment has been very interesting, Mr. Scott, in terms of discoverability and the approach that the CRTC has with broadcasters and the industry to say that we don't impose ways of doing, but we suggest that people improve and we put in place processes to give everyone opportunities to improve. So question, I'm going back to the YouTubers and TikTokers who saying, well, I'm not profiting from this and I'm not recognized as Canadian content. So the creators of digital content, these people we're talking about, are those that we would want to present to the platforms when we ask them to present more Canadian content? I think we're talking about very different definitions of what Canadian content is, be it an audio piece for music or... So I don't want to interrupt you because I have very little time, but my question is, these people who are making videos, we're talking about this skateboarding lady and others who have recipes, share their recipes. Could those people be considered as Canadian content and then subject to the regulations or the guidelines for discoverability, in your opinion? So the objective of the law be that Canadian content, that people who produce Canadian content be discovered by Canadians on these platforms. Several groups are asking us to bring back the recourse to the Governor and Council. So Articles 128, 1 amendments are proposed to be able to challenge a CRTC decision. So if that doesn't come back in the law, are there other ways that citizens can challenge a CRTC decision? Yes, the CRTC is an administrative tribunal. Its decisions have a right of appeal in the provided in the Broadcasting Act, or also judicial review, and they can have recourse to the Governor and Council to challenge some certain decisions. So there are several avenues available to them for available to a party who's dissatisfied with a CRTC decision. I think I just have a few more seconds to ask you. No, I came really close.
For 2.5 minutes.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Désolé, Monsieur Champoux. One of the things that has come up in the hearings is exclusion and discrimination that's currently taking place with with online streaming companies. Out TV, that in testimony talked about online streaming companies basically refusing to carry them. And so I wanted to hear your comments in the CRTC in terms of accessibility or exclusion or discrimination. How would the CRTC handle those kinds of cases? And currently, online streaming companies are not subject to any sort of oversight. So how would that change with C11?
Well, first of all, whatever we did would be subject to a public proceedings where we would, receive evidence, views on how best to achieve it. It is clear. Currently we have what is called Section 9(1)H, which involves mandatory carriage. There could be equivalent kinds of conditions of service that could be used following a process, if that were the ultimate decision, to ensure that that kind of content, whether it be Indigenous, content for racialized Canadians or ethnic groups or LGBTQ2+, and so on, they're important elements of the broader objectives of the Broadcasting Act, and we will look at various measures to do so. I don't want to go on too long. One quick point I would make is where we won't have symmetry is we can deal with mediation and arbitration with respect to licensees, but the Act does not contemplate that in the case of online providers.
Yes, and that's an important thing that I think committee has to look at in terms of amendments. The definition of Canadian content, Mr. Champoux asked that question. We've had testimony, Turning Red, which is a quintessential Canadian film from Pixar. I saw it on the plane coming up. It's not defined as Canadian. So is it something that the CRTC has to engage in to define Canadian content in a way that allows Canadian content creators
For once, I'll be
benefit?
brief. Yes.
Yes.
30 seconds.
So that is part of where the CRTC
Sorry,
sees
Mr.
itself.
Champoux.
Yes, no, but
Yes.
that's important. What
Yes, it will be
you're
an
committing,
important part
you're
of-
committing to looking at Canadian content rules in a way that is much more open and accepting of.
As part of an overall regulatory scheme, it will be necessary and important to develop definitions about what is Canadian content, both for audio and audiovisual.
Thank you very much. Peter, we have ended there. And I just wanted to say that, that we've come to the end of this panel. And I wanted to thank the CRTC for their patience in waiting for the length of time that they waited before they could come on. And I want to thank them for staying and being so very open and honest with us in this panel. So thank you very much. And yes, sorry.
Thank you. I was just going to say thank you, Madam Chair, and it's our pleasure. We are here to try and help the committee's work, and we're happy to appear. Thank you.
Thank you. And now I will suspend while we get to the second panel. Thank you. Witnesses, starting with Pierre-Carl Pelledeau from Québécois Media and Peggy Tavet, and who are in the room. Then we have Sarah Bannerman, Canada Researcher in Communications Policy and Governance and Associate Professor at McMaster University, and Gordon Sinclair. Both are individuals. We then go to the International Alliance of Theatrical Stage Employees with John Morgan Lewis, representing as International Vice President and Director of Canadian Affairs. We go to Wendy Noss, who is President of Motion Picture Association Canada. And we go to Netflix, represented by Stéphane Cordin, who is Director of Public Policy. I would just, and YouTube with Jeanette Patel, Head of Canada Government Affairs and Public Policy. Now, I would like to just give you a quick overview of what we're going to do. Each organization has 5 minutes. I will give you a 30-second warning when you get to within 30 seconds of the time. If you have more than one person in your association, you can work out how you use your 5 minutes. Also, after that, it's going to be followed by a question and answer period, which may not be a very long one today, given the time. So I shall begin with Québécois Media. Who will be speaking? Monsieur Pelledeau, for 5 minutes, please.
La présidente, vous l'avez mentionné.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As you mentioned, I'm Pierre-Carl Pelledeau. I have with me Madame Peggy Tavet, who is the Vice President for Regulatory and Environmental Affairs. So Bill C-11, which seeks to amend an obsolete law dating back to 1991, is an opportunity for the legislator to redress the growing and dramatic historical inequity between foreign online broadcasting platforms and Canadian companies. As you certainly know, a CRTC license was required to obtain the status as a broadcaster and cable operator. This license was legitimately attached to conditions and subject to regulation. Technology, of course, internet, and globalization have made it possible to circumvent these licensing requirements in this new fundamental and inescapable configuration into which foreign giants with enormous financial capacities have arrived. we say that we must now remove our Canadian businesses from being subject to a plethora of heavy regulations and conditions that constantly stifle them and threaten their very sustainability. Last January, the Academy of Digital Transformation at Laval University published a study which concludes unequivocally that for the first time in Quebec, paid online viewing services have surpassed traditional cable television services. In fact, 71% of Quebec adults subscribe to paid online viewing services, while 66% subscribe to a cable television service. For years now, Québecor has been repeating and communicating to the various authorities that traditional local broadcasters and cable operators such as TVA and Videotron, which showcase our culture and promote our local artists and our talents, are facing fierce competition in an outdated and unfairly regulated environment. Unbridled competition from unconstrained online platforms such as Netflix, Amazon, and Disney Plus that are completely exempt from any constraints, combined with the overwhelmingly heavily CRTC regulations, as I said, threatens the sustainability of our local businesses and thus our cultural sovereignty, as well as our ability to rigorously inform Canadians with the resources necessary to do so. The challenge now is to restore fairness and to reduce the regulatory burden. In fact, overregulation has also contributed to weakening traditional local broadcasters and cable operators. This approach has been a monumental failure. Our broadcasters have never been at a greater disadvantage, and they're struggling to compete. In total, between 2010 and 2020, the combined earnings before interests and taxes of the main private conventional channels fell by almost $216 million. TVA alone suffered a loss of nearly $60 million. Other than CBC SRC, no company can survive without profits. In this context, the legislator must necessarily restore equity between Canadian and foreign companies and substantially reduce the regulatory and financial burden, such as Part 2 fees. In this regard, it's highly concerning that Bill C-11 no longer brings up the principle of fairness between the various players in the industry, whereas it was present in the previous bill. In order to put an end to the current two-tier system, the legislator should amend the bill in order to ensure that all broadcasting undertakings are treated in a fair and equitable way. Actually, a very simple solution exists. Instead of asking the CRTC for a new set of tentacle-like regulations full of mind-boggling requirements, the legislator should instead go to the heart of the matter by favoring a lighter regulatory regime in which foreign online broadcasting platforms contribute financially to our ecosystem and to the various industry stakeholders in order to keep our Canadian broadcasting system strong and able to contribute. Ladies and gentlemen, and MPs, thank you for your attention. Thank you very much, Mr. Pelado.
Go to Sarah Bannerman, who is an individual Canada researcher in communications policy. For 5 minutes, Ms. Bannerman.
Thank you. I'm a Canada Research Chair in Communication Policy and Governance at McMaster University, and thanks so much for inviting me. Today, I want to focus on discoverability and algorithmic bias. Governments around the world are working on measures to ensure that algorithms are accountable. There's a common misconception that streaming platforms recommend what the user wants to see. Platforms show us what they want to show us. They show us what will keep us watching ads, purchasing advertised products, contributing data, and subscribing. Platforms are not neutral. They serve their business interests as well. There are 3 types of bias that I'm concerned about. These biases can affect both users and content providers. First, there could be a bias if algorithms used to select content for carriage on streaming services, if algorithms are used to select content by predicting how many viewers the content will attract. A poor algorithmic showing could sink a content provider's chances of being shown. Second, there can be bias in the recommendation algorithms that users use to discover content. Recommendations often display popularity bias, recommending what's popular and concentrating users' viewing on a smaller catalog of content. This can be unfair to artists in the long tail and to users who like non-popular content. It could be unfair to Canadian content, including user-generated content. Third, users' own biases can be amplified. Beyond users' biases for or against Canadian content, if users have gender or other biases, for example, this could be amplified in the recommendations that respond to past viewing habits. Such biases can form a feedback loop that can spread throughout the system. The research in this area is only developing recently. CRTC intervention in the algorithms raises many difficult problems. The CRTC may not be the first, most likely, or best answer to those problems. The CRTC said today it doesn't want to play that role, but the Commission could play a role in bringing such problems to light. There are concerns that requiring discoverability could infringe on freedom of expression. Streaming services, user interfaces, and recommendations may be forms of an expression, and if so, regulatory interventions could contribute a limit on that expression. There are legitimate concerns that promoting some content could mean demoting other content, among other concerns. Sometimes limits on expression are justified, but they must be justified. To understand whether any justification exists, or even just to understand, we need data. It may be that the best role for the CRTC will be to monitor and call attention to problems, not just with the discoverability of Canadian content, but also with recommender biases relating to other Canadian values, so that civil society and others can intervene. The CRTC can only do that if it has data. The provisions on information provision and information disclosure in the bill are important to the study and examination of discoverability, algorithms, and data, and to the CRTC's potential work with outside organizations on this. It may be necessary to require platforms to collect certain data to permit these examinations to happen. The General Powers Information Provision section of the bill could include the phrase collection and provision. That section could also name information on discoverability as information that the Commission can demand. I disagree with proposals that would allow a company to prevent the disclosure of information in section 25.3. The Canadian broadcasting system has often served dominant groups. It's also been open to change and improvement based on the work of civil society and others. We need to ensure that the discoverability mechanisms of online streaming platforms are also open to critique and change through public transparency, debate, and data. Thank you.
Dr. Fry, you're on mute.
For 5 minutes, please, Mr. Sinclair. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Gordon Sinclair, and I'm a member of the Tragically Hip. I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. The HIP set out from Kingston, Ontario in the mid-1980s, and our journey took us around the world and lasted over 30 years. It concluded where it began back in Kingston when our final concert was broadcast nationwide and viewed by a third of the population of Canada. How did we wind up there? Over the years, we wrote some good songs, we worked hard, and we had great fans. But in the beginning, we were beneficiaries of CanCon, the partnership between private broadcasters and government. This was not a handout. For us, it was a leg up. With the help of our managers, we recorded an EP, got signed to a label, and with their help, we were able to get some airplay at radio. That gave us enough exposure across the country to take the show on the road, as so many great Canadian entertainers have done. Canadians excel at live performance. The sheer size of the country is our greatest asset. The road is long and hard, vast distances between gigs. You can't have a day job and aspire to be a performer in Canada. You either learn to love the life and your traveling companions, or you break up. The late, great Ronnie Hawkins always said that Canadians have to work 10 times as hard to get us 10th as far. The artists who do endure have honed their talent to a very high standard. Canadian musicians are seasoned travelers. They've learned to play live and live on the road, and that's what sets us apart. Somehow during the years and the hours of staring out the van window at granite and black spruce, you discover what it means to be a Canadian. You realize that despite its size, distinct regions, and communities, there's more that binds us together in this country that separates us. The Hip wrote songs from that perspective. Many of them resonated with our fellow Canadians and enjoy enduring popularity. Through the travel and the space and the time and the weather, the songwriter searches for meaning and what gives us a common identity. Nations create and preserve themselves through the stories they tell. Words set to rhythm and melodies are our stories. They allowed us to enjoy a long, fruitful career until Gord Downie's untimely death. Walt Whitman wrote that the proof of a poet is that his country absorbs him as affectionately as he absorbs it. In 2022, 5 years, it's 2020, since the loss of Leonard Cohen and Gord. We must ask ourselves where our next generation of poets will come from. How can we help them discover themselves? Times change. In the 30 years that the Hip were performing, we went from producing vinyl records and cassettes to CDs, videos, DATs, through Napster to iTunes, YouTube, and now to streaming and its dominant platform, Spotify. Through it all, until recently, there have been live shows to make ends meet, but people no longer buy physical products our industry produces. In the digital age, people haven't given up on music, just the idea of paying for it. That business model is unsustainable. We are all stakeholders of the arts, and the future has never been more dire. For years, traditional broadcasters, in partnership with the federal government, have helped develop and sustain Canadian recording artists. The Canadian Music Fund provides critical support for music in this country. What will happen if that funding disappears? Gord Downie wrote in our song Morning Moon that if something's too cheap, somebody's paying something. Every song ever recorded can now be streamed for less than $10 a month. The somebodies in this case will be the future you and I, when we realize that we've undervalued the contribution of Canadian musicians and songwriters. There's no better art form to preserve, promote, and export our culture than music. But after 2 years of pandemic-induced venue closures, canceled performances, our domestic industry is in peril. Artists must see a glimmer of hope for a career in music, or they will simply give up. Where will our next Joni Mitchell come from if we abandon our young artists? Artistic development takes time. If we don't actually value something at a level necessary to sustain it, it will surely disappear. Streaming is here to stay, but the platforms and ISPs must contribute to the long-term health of the arts in some way. They must look on it as an investment. Streaming is a great way for artists to have their material heard, to discover new music and be discovered. But in an industry that's seen the majority of its revenue streams disappear, how can an artist earn a living? Streaming can help, but regulations must adapt to allow Canadian culture to flourish in the digital age. It has to begin at home. My worry is that many will give up before they get the chance to find their voice. As much as the global market is important, Canadian artists must also reach their fellow Canadians from coast to coast to coast. In today's environment, there is a place for everyone, just as there is a place for streaming alongside traditional broadcasters and live performance. Our potential as a creative nation is as vast as the country itself. Songwriters are our best cultural ambassadors. We are compelled to create, to express what we know and what we feel. We need partners in government and industry, including streaming. Right now, somewhere in Canada, a young artist is searching for their voice, the right bit of melody to go with the perfect
30
words.
seconds, Mr. Sinclair.
Thank you. We need your help to hear those voices. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Oh, thank you. I didn't mean to stop you in your tracks, Mr. Sinclair.
No, that's okay.
Okay, thank you very much. I'd now like to go to the International Alliance of Theatrical Stage Employees, Mr. Lewis, for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you. The IA is the largest union in the entertainment industry, representing 32,000 Canadian creatives and technicians across film, television, and live performance, with another 10,000 creatives working under our agreements as they learn and acquire the skills and certifications necessary for membership. IA members are highly skilled cinematographers, costume designers, aerial riggers, makeup artists, hairstylists, sound set decorators, scenic artists, and more, all working behind the scenes. In a word, we are the crew. And I first want to state that the IATSC supports the federal government's efforts to modernize the Broadcasting Act through Bill C-11. We are also pleased that Minister Rodriguez wants to re-examine what should qualify as a Canadian production. So what does make a film or TV production Canadian? Despite what you regularly hear, CanCon is not necessarily about telling Canadian stories. What's happening is that due to dwindling revenues, Canadian media companies are receiving less money from domestic broadcasters. They therefore like to create more funding by having government require global studios and streamers to, quote, stop the free ride, quote, and kick in to fund CanCon productions. The thing is, they already do. Global studios and streamers are the second largest source of financing for Canadian-owned content production, with foreign pre-sales and advances accounting for 15% of total financing. And by comparison, the Canadian Media Fund accounts for 10% and Telefilm accounts for 1%. Minister Rodriguez referenced creating good middle-class jobs as a Bill C-11 objective. Global studios and streamers are now also the largest employers of Canadians working in film. They account for over half, 58% of total production investment in Canada, and provide the majority of jobs, 60%. Highly skilled Canadians are able to stay in Canada. New infrastructure like studios and equipment provide opportunities that weren't possible without foreign investment. Cultural policy should support investment in Canadian creative workers and not exclusively benefit Canadian production companies. It is important to celebrate, protect, and promote our culture, but the current system wrongly relies on a few mandatory conditions like IP ownership or control, plus a 10-point system in which films must score at least 6 to be considered Canadian. Under the current system, The Handmaid's Tale doesn't qualify as Canadian. It's based on a novel by Canadian author Margaret Atwood, who served as a consulting producer. It features Canada-centric plot lines, was filmed in Canada, employing hundreds of Canadians, and garnered 75 Emmy nominations. Canadians were recognized internationally for their skills in art direction, production designs, hairstyling, makeup artistry, costume design, visual effects, and editing. The story is similar for Jusqu'au déclin. It's a French language Canadian storyline featuring Canadian actors, written by Canadians and filmed by Canadians. And like The Handmaid's Tale, the workers on this production also garnered awards. Unlike The Handmaid's Tale, it also doesn't qualify as Canadian. The only thing not Canadian about this production is that Netflix funded it. We need a fair system to determine which production should be considered Canadian. The Canadian 10-point system isn't only flawed, it's exclusionary. The point system prioritizes the hiring of Canadians, as it should. Having a Canadian director, you get 2 points. Canadian screenwriter, you get 2 points. Costume designer, 0 points. Head of makeup, head of hairstyling, 0 points. And we're talking about creative positions that are recognized with awards like Oscars, Emmys, BAFTAs, and the Canadian Screen Awards. But the Canadians performing them don't count for a single point, not to mention the hundreds of Canadian crew. So what should a new system look like? First, the 4 conditions that are currently mandatory, such as IP ownership, should be considered, but not determinative. Second, the 10-point system must be expanded. In the UK, the British Film Institute uses a 35-point cultural test, and productions must score at least 18 to qualify as British. The higher point system means more factors can be considered, such as whether the film is based on British subject matter, if it's a majority British cast, majority British crew, and where the story is set. The Netherlands 210-point cultural system considers all this and more. These countries and many others demonstrate that a stronger, fairer system is possible, and we are confident that's the intention behind Bill C-11. The IA supports its passage, and we must modernize our system so that it best serves and promotes Canada, our workers, and our stories. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Lewis. I now go for 5 minutes to Wendy Noss, Motion Picture Association Canada.
Madam Chair and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to offer you the perspective of the members of the Motion Picture Association Canada. These include Disney, Netflix, NBC Universal, Paramount Global, Sony Pictures Entertainment, and Warner Brothers Discovery. Global Studios train and provide well-paid opportunities for 200,000 of Canada's talented creative workers. Our investment here has grown to $5 billion a year, more than half of all production in Canada. We help finance new infrastructure, stages, VFX, and animation studios across the country. Our work is economic fuel for more than 47,000 Canadian businesses a year. We invest in cleaner production and are leaders in environmental sustainability. We're proud supporters of Canadian cultural organizations and are committed to advancing equity and diversity, representation in front of and behind the camera, and amplifying underrepresented voices and untold stories. Global Studios are crucial partners of Canadian producers. We account for 15% of the financing of all Canadian-owned content last year, and that's more than Telefilm and CMF combined. Thanks to the opportunities presented by global streaming services, the films and shows made here are seen by more people in more places around the world than ever before. This is a story of extraordinary mutual opportunity and plenty of room to grow. Now, let me turn to C11. And to put our interest in perspective, our studios and streamers offer a wide variety of content in both free-to-consumer and subscriber streaming services. From the global entertainment of Netflix, Disney Plus, to Paramount Plus, to Heiyu's all-reality show format, or Sony's Japanese anime service, so popular across the Francophonie. When Bill C-10 was introduced, we supported the important thought at the heart of the bill, a flexible framework to determine how online undertakings can best contribute to Canada. With C11, we continue to support the government's drive to modernize policy and create a flexible, world-class broadcasting system. We offer a few key amendments to help the bill deliver on these ambitions, described more fully in our submission. First, new powers were intended to extend the concept of mandatory carriage in the cable system so that online services like Apple TV or Roku, who offer third-party channels. The current drafting language, however, goes far beyond that intention. It must only be limited to online undertakings that offer the programming services of others. Second, we applaud Minister Rodriguez for confirming that he will direct the CRTC to modernize how a Canadian program is defined. Our simple amendment would make it explicit that the CRTC must consider the full range of policy objectives in establishing this new approach, with no one single factor being determinative. Third, we recommend changes to clarify inconsistencies in the broadcasting policy objectives, ensuring the CRTC considers the different nature of various streaming services and the fact that global, not just Canadian undertakings, will now be included in the regulatory system. In addition to these amendments, we've raised policy approaches relating to discoverability and the importance of encouraging competition, innovation, consumer choice, and affordability. We hope these will be advanced in the policy direction and CRTC proceedings that follow. In this rapidly evolving market fueled by new technology, Canadians will be best served if you reject the calls to look backward and impose the same obligations on global online undertakings as Canadian broadcasting groups, or enshrine rigid old approaches to defining Canadian content in legislation. Our members contribute to Canada in so many ways, but the business models of global streaming services are fundamentally different from those of Canadian broadcasters, and certainly different from broadcasters in the 1970s when these rules on Canadian content were developed. While many are asking you to make amendments to reduce flexibility, it's time for policy that leans into a more modern definition of creativity and offers global players flexibility to contribute to all Canadian goals: cultural, social, environmental, and economic.
30 seconds.
A fresh look at a wider lens will mean incredible opportunities for a lot more talented Canadians in the future. Global productions allow Canadians to work at the top of their craft and achieve worldwide success. Talented Canadians who want to stay in Canada, develop their skills, and help create stories that resonate with audiences around the world need this policy to be flexible and adaptive. Thank you for the opportunity, and I look forward to any questions.
Thank you very much, Ms. Noss, and I will now go to Stéphane Cardin from Netflix. 5 minutes, please, Mr. Cardin.
Thank you. Madame la Présidente, members.
Madam Chair.
De me donner l'occasion.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk to you today.
In February 2021, we've continued to invest and grow our footprint in Canada. Last fall, we opened our corporate office in Toronto and hired our first local content executives. They've since traveled across the country and engaged with creators to find the next great Canadian stories that we'll share with the world. Over the same period, we kept the cameras rolling in studios and on locations across the country while keeping our cast and crews safe during COVID-19. We continued to collaborate with top animation studios in Canada on titles like The Last Kids on Earth, and several leading VFX companies here worked their magic on shows such as The Atom Project, starring our own Ryan Reynolds. And last November, we launched our first selection of mobile games, including several titles from Canadian game developers. All of these investments add up to Canada remaining one of our top production countries globally. In fact, since 2017, we've invested more than $3.5 billion in Canada for films and series that have launched on Netflix. This includes our own titles, co-licensing agreements with Canadian independent producers and broadcasters, and acquisitions of both classic and new series and films in English and in French. Each of these models contributes to the system. De plus, nous avons offert un appui de taille.
In addition, we've provided substantial support and opportunities to Canadian creators. We've enabled emerging and diverse Canadian talent like Maitreyi Ramakrishnan, star of the hit series Never Have I Ever, to secure their breakout roles and achieve global recognition. And we've partnered with over 20 organizations across Canada to advance the careers of over 1,000 creators from every province and territory, with a focus on creators for underrepresented communities. All of this demonstrates that Netflix is committed to Canada. To the extent that the bill, as tabled, aims to create a flexible framework that will enable the CRTC to recognize the different ways that individual online services contribute, to tailor conditions of service applied to online undertakings, and to modernize the definition of Canadian content, we believe that is the right approach.
About a rigid approach that would simply transpose the current regulatory requirements of Canadian broadcasting groups onto online streaming services. This would not create a level playing field, nor would it be fair or equitable. Unlike Canada's large private sector broadcasters, Netflix would not have the ability to meet its obligations through categories such as news or sports programming, which represent the majority of their Canadian content spending. And titles that are produced or solely financed by Netflix still would not qualify, even when the majority or totality of creative roles are held by Canadians. Le nouveau cadre réglementaire devrait aussi reconnaître.
The new framework should also recognize that streaming services provide an unparalleled opportunity to promote Canadian stories to global audiences. The phenomenal success of titles like Lupin and Canada's own Schitt's Creek and Jusqu'au déclin demonstrates that quality stories no longer have borders. Accordingly, we and other members of the MPA Canada have proposed amendments to the bill as outlined in our written submission.
The Broadcasting Act. It stated its ambition to create a world-class communications sector and highlighted the importance of enabling and promoting Canadian culture, contributing to economic growth, and safeguarding the interests of Canadian consumers, including affordability and choice. To achieve this, Canada must build a balanced and forward-looking model that acknowledges the unique contributions of each participant in the system. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd be happy to answer your questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cardin. And I will now go to the final witness, and that is Jeanette Patel from YouTube. Ms. Patel, 5 minutes, please.
Merci, Madame la Présidente et membres du comité.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, committee members, for having invited me to speak to you today.
Raising diverse voices and sharing Canadian stories around the globe. Thanks to YouTube, creators like the Hacksmith are building businesses. Artists like Shawn Mendes are breaking through. And Canadians from all walks of life can share their voices with the world. Canadian YouTuber Lily Singh explained it best when she said, "For Canadian creators who don't fit the mainstream mold, the openness of YouTube provides the opportunity to find their niche among billions of people." We've seen firsthand that when barriers are removed and Canadians are given equal, free access to an open platform and a global audience, they can take on the world. For Canadian creators, YouTube is a level playing field on a world stage. It doesn't matter who you know or what you look like. Any Canadian with an idea and a smartphone can be a creator and find an audience on YouTube. In many ways, YouTube serves as a digital video library of Canadian culture, past, present, and future. It has allowed our Canadian heritage moments to cross borders with over 28 million views. Et encore plus, notre partenariat avec le Fonds des médias du Canada.
Encore Plus, our partnership with the Canada Media Fund, has brought CanCon favorites to viewers around the world. We support the objectives of C11, and we want to work together to achieve these shared goals.
About YouTube's position on C11 because it is often misunderstood and sometimes misrepresented. Some believe that we want to avoid all regulation. This is not true. In fact, when the minister says that an official song by The Weeknd on YouTube should be subject to the Act, we have no objection to that. And we certainly have no objection to further financially contributing to Canadian content. Our concern is that Bill C11 gives the government control over every aspect of Canadians' experience on YouTube. It does not include effective guardrails on either the powers given to the CRTC or the content to which those powers apply. Et quand je dis contenu, je veux dire tout le contenu.
And when I say content, I mean all content, whether that's a dance challenge, a cat video, or an official music video by Charlotte Cardin.
As written, the CRTC could determine what content should be promoted in Canada through discoverability obligations and how Canadian creators advertise against their content. This approach puts the regulator between viewers and creators, handing the CRTC the power to decide who wins and who loses. Bill C11 could deeply hurt Canadian creators and viewers. For viewers who rely on us to serve them content that is relevant to their interests, artificially forcing an open platform like YouTube to recommend content based on government priorities would backfire. It imposes supply-side measures onto a demand-based technology and ignores two critical features of today's digital reality. First, Canadians have infinite choice. If the government mandates that they be recommended content that is not personally relevant, they will simply abandon the video or even give it a thumbs down. And the second is that these behaviors train our systems, and that's where the risk to creators comes in. The system learns that this content is not relevant or engaging for viewers, and then it applies those lessons on a global scale. It means that ultimately creators boosted in Canada as CanCon could be demoted in search results around the world, and that is a terrifying prospect for Canadian creators who depend on international audiences for over 90% of their watch time, and it would directly hurt their revenue. It is possible to support Canadian musicians, artists, and storytellers without putting thousands of creators at risk, and we have some ideas of how. The first is to protect the livelihood of Canada's digital creators by narrowing the language of Section 4.2 to only capture full-length commercial music. The second is to
18
strengthen
seconds for
9.1 to prevent regulatory impacts to recommendation algorithms. And finally, to narrowly apply broadcasting regulations and better reflect differing technology and business models. We are confident that with more precision in Bill C-11, the government can accomplish its objectives. Ultimately, we all have the same goal, to preserve and celebrate Canadian stories and culture. Merci pour l'opportunité de...
Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today on this important piece of legislation.
Well, thank you, Ms. Patel. I will now have to go. I'm afraid, colleagues, that we have to amend our schedule today, our agenda. So we will not have the business meeting today, and we will go with one round of 5 minutes each for the 4 political parties. So I will begin with, who will the Conservatives begin with, please?
That'd be me, John Nader.
Yes, John, begin for 5 minutes, please.
Try to ask as many questions as I possibly can in a short amount of time. Starting with Mr. Cardin and Netflix. One of the things I've learned is that season 3 of the Umbrella Academy is premiering in June. Of course, starring the Stratford Festival's Confior, and I understand also which again Stratford Festival opening week is this week. Everyone come to Stratford, which of course is filmed in Ontario. The Umbrella Academy. Would the Umbrella Academy count as Canadian content?
It also stars Canada's Elliot Page. And no, Umbrella Academy would not count as Canadian content.
So when you're investing $3.5 billion in Canada, employing many Canadians, including I'm assuming some of Mr. Lewis's members, all of that investment doesn't provide you with any benefits, if you will, from the Canadian content system. Am I right to assume that?
Well, it's just the definition only recognizes a subset of the productions that we make in Canada. As I mentioned, projects that we own or fully finance are not recognized because of the copyright ownership requirements in current certification criteria. The content that we work on in collaboration with Canadian broadcasters and independent producers does count towards CanCon certification criteria.
Thank you very much, and I may come back to you if I have time, but I want to switch to Ms. Patel and YouTube. We've talked a little bit about the policy directive from the minister. We haven't seen it. I'm assuming you haven't seen it. We heard earlier that the CRTC hasn't seen it. So a lot of what will come out of C11 will be defined by what the minister puts in his policy directive. We know that policy directives can change, that a future government could issue its own policy directive and redefine things. So we've been told the minister will go a certain direction with a policy directive, but we have seen nothing in writing. I wanted your thoughts on that aspect, on this policy directive that no one seems to have seen yet, and are just taking the just trust us approach from the government that it will be what they say it will be, and I guess what they hope it will be. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think, the first thing I'll say is that what's amazing is that there is an alignment when it comes to, the question of user-generated content and whether it should be within scope of the bill. There is alignment in terms of the minister's intention and certainly, what we've heard from the creator community, that content should not be within scope of the bill. And I think really what we're asking is for that to be explicitly. What's amazing is that there is an alignment when it comes to.
I am sorry. Just a second, please. There is noise that's interrupting anyone's ability to listen.
VFX.
Please, can people mute their phones, their microphones on the floor? Thank you.
All right, I'll start again. I think, going back to, I think we're all aligned on the intent here. And when it comes to the role of, how should that be reflected in whether that's in legislation or a policy directive, I think, the creator community merits and the certainty of how their content, which is their livelihood, will be regulated going forward. And that's why I think it's absolutely appropriate and very achievable, by the way, to reflect that in the legislative text. I think we don't have to put the livelihoods of creators at risk to support, Canadian musicians and artists. I think we are all very collaborative and smart people, and this is something that can absolutely be done in the text itself. And I simply would, it's not clear to me why we would, give this expansive discretion to the CRTC in the text of the law, and when we're in the premise that this is not going to be regulated. And if that premise is it's not to be regulated, then I think that it makes the most sense to have that reflected in the text rather than handing over the authority to future governments to simply make that change going forward.
And in my 30 seconds, which I think the chair will extend by at least a minute, given that small interruption, we talk about the global reach that YouTube has. Obviously, you operate in countries globally, and we look at successes like Justin Bieber from Stratford, Ontario, who has found success through things like YouTube. What is it that's unique about new technology, about new platforms that allows Canadian content to be viewed and to be celebrated and find success globally and around the world?
The most amazing thing is that niche content that never would have had an opportunity, wouldn't have had a large enough audience in conventional media that is constrained by, programming time and geographic reach. So, someone who, like Simply Nailogical, who has 7 million subscribers for nail art, right? Absolutely amazing. That kind of content isn't going to break through in mass media, but there is a global audience for it. So by putting it in front of that the world stage, really gives those creators a chance.
Thank you very much. You may expand on it in any other questions you get. All right, I'll now go to, for Liberals, Tim Lewis, you're next, for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I want to thank all the panelists for being here. It's a tremendous panel. Really appreciate your time. I would direct my questions right now to Mr. Gordon Sinclair. I would say that the Tragically Hip certainly qualifies as a source of pride for Canadian talent. I can tell you, as a musician who's toured Canada for years myself, you'll be happy to hear that wasn't a night that I was on stage when someone didn't come up to me and ask me to play the hip. So that's part of your legacy. And I appreciate you being here, advocating for songwriters, lyricists, concert composers, music publishers, the whole ecosystem. One of the reasons that I work so hard to get here is to ensure fair compensation for the use of artists' work. Not many years ago, artists could make a living from album sales. Even as an independent musician myself, it was possible to make enough from sales of music to at least make your next album. And as you mentioned, since streaming, that situation has certainly changed. Can you comment on how much more challenging it is to have a career as a songwriter without getting the return of investment of the expenses it costs to record?
Well, the entire system breaks down as you're attempting it's not as simple as just going down into your basement and recording into your garage band. It costs money to produce a song, it costs money to distribute a song, and without any kind of potential of remuneration, it's just unsustainable. It's difficult even at the label level for established artists to find budgets now to produce what they need to produce without very little opportunity of album sales at all. And so it's difficult to see how we're going to be able to be compensated without some assistance from this bill.
Appreciate that. It's not only about the revenues too. It's about getting our songs out there. To make a living, you have to be heard. And right now, foreign streaming services have zero obligation to promote our Canadian creators, even to Canadian artists. And we talk about streaming and hearing that, like you said, the platforms are doing well. Even the major labels are readjusting and getting there. Certain number of small artists that were mentioned at the highest level are doing well, but it's those emerging and the mid-level artists that we can't ignore. What's the importance of supporting the ecosystem that can showcase Canadian artists at all levels so they can become the next international artists?
Well, yeah, to my mind, the most important thing is allowing younger artists the opportunity that I had in the older system. Again, without a great stroke of luck, it's very, very difficult to launch a career. And it's really important from a cultural and a heritage standpoint that those voices are able to be heard from coast to coast to coast. It's important that someone from Victoria can hear someone from St. John's, someone from Qualit can hear someone from Toronto, and vice versa. That's the foundation of a national heritage. To me, the ecosystem really needs to revolve around distribution, whether it's streaming or traditional radio, but also creating an environment and investing in the ability for young artists and established artists to go on the road and to take their shows to places that traditionally people don't play. That's how we were able to do it. That was the system that we used to call it the circuit. I'm sure you remember it well. But I'm from a small town in Ontario, and when someone, an established artist, came to town, that was a big night. It was a community night, and when it was a Canadian artist, you saw them in the context of an international artist, and that music meant something. And you looked around and you saw people from your community and realized, oh, you share a musical taste, you share a foundation. And that, to me, is what heritage really, really is. And if we lose that, it's going to be very, very difficult to get that back.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, and coming from you, that certainly means a lot. So I want to thank you for being here, your advocacy. I'm almost out of time, but I think you've earned the right to be here and to share your story with us, so we can find the next artists from Kingston or Kitchener, where I'm from, or the Yukon, sure, or anywhere in Canada. So I appreciate your time.
I agree. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. And I now go to Mr. Shampoo for 5 minutes for the Bloc Québécois, please.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll continue with Mr. Sinclair just for a comment. It's my groupie moment. I wasn't a big fan of the Tragically Hip, but my brother-in-law Richard, who's now deceased, was one of your greatest fan, and he made me listen to it, and he'd turn up the volume when your songs were playing on Showm. So I've become more of a fan, and now I'm the person in North America who listened the most often and at the loudest to Bob Cajan's music. So thank you, and thank you for your evidence today. It was wonderful to hear you. So how I would like to address my first question to Ms. Patel. A bit earlier today, the chair of the CRTC told us that the CRTC would not go and play with the algorithms. So Siri is trying to do something to me here, sorry. Is not going to go into influencing programming on digital platforms, but goals would be established, and in collaboration with platforms such as YouTube and others, we would look for ways of improving things. So in collaboration, so your suggestions on how to do better, for example, in terms of discoverability, how do you respond to that statement he made? Do you think it still could endanger the programming of your algorithms?
For the opportunity to address that. I think, I welcomed the comments from the chair of the commission earlier today. And I think, really our request here is to ensure that that is adequately reflected in the text of the bill. And I think that there's every opportunity to do that. And the first way to do that is actually to clarify, well, really there's three things to clarify. One is the scope of content to which it applies, and to ensure that, there isn't room for either misunderstanding, misinterpretation, or, future expansion of the regulatory action. And second, with regards to the language around the algorithmic protections, I think there's an opportunity there to strengthen that language further, just to ensure that there's absolute clarity about, that this is not going to be a vehicle to secure certain outcomes. And I think, one of the things that he spoke to was with regards to the powers that would be provided to the CRTC under this bill. Discoverability was one of the things that he mentioned. But I think it's really important to look at the actual text of the provision of 9(1)(e), which says specifically, presentation of programs for selection by the Canadian public, including Canadian original programming. And for us, that's why when we raise these concerns, because when you apply that to Section 4.2, which is really just a set of considerations, as was described to us by heritage officials, that this is really, the Commission must consider these matters, but they're not bound by those matters when they determine what content is in scope. So the combination of an expansive scope of coverage with this very broad power to determine the presentation of the content for the selection by the Canadian public, that's what poses these great concerns for us, because that is the interface of the platform between the user and the content itself.
Merci. Je veux prendre un...
Thank you. I'd like to take some time to speak to Mr. Pelado as well. We've often talked about rebalancing the rules of the game and the market and to make them more fair. And you often bring up the question of Part 2 fees. Is that enough to make things a bit more fair for broadcasters? It's a very good question. And I mentioned it because that seems the most obvious to us, but I think we should also need to consider the entire ecosystem. I think it's important to emphasize more and more, and we mustn't think that Canadian broadcasters they have been left behind, and we've invested in online streaming for more than 10 years. So Illico Club proposes series. There are series that are very important in terms of the investment that's made, and I know we have discussions on what Canadian content is, but I can tell you that all the series that we've made were made with actors and filming crews in Canadian places, and broadcast by Canadian companies, of whom the majority of shareholders are Canadian. So we'll continue to do that, and we have to look at the situation as a whole. So the publicity income, and I know you will be talking about C18, so publicity income is important because it's the only source of income for general or traditional broadcasters. And if they're disappearing, well, these resources won't be available for all of the production, be it of a series or for a news production. Mr. Pelego, I think we have 8 seconds, so I don't think we can talk about the CBC mandate. Well, I think we also need to emphasize that's not in the bill. I think the legislators and the bill should ensure that in this regard there's not unfair competition, because the publicity income that I was speaking of earlier is an important source for CBC, which should be all dedicated to private broadcasters. Thank you, Mr. Pelado.
Go to the New Democratic Party. Peter Julian, for 5 minutes, please, Peter.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thanks to all the witnesses for your important testimony. I wish we had more time. The filibuster earlier tonight cut a couple of hours out and basically cut off our questioning time, and I really regret that sabotaging of what is an important part of the work that we have to do as a committee. So I will take my 5 minutes and start with with John Morgan Lewis. Mr. Lewis, appreciate the work of the IA members. They are very important in my riding. You mentioned, and it was an important fact around Canadian content. Other countries evaluate content on a much larger scale. 35 point you mentioned in Britain. I believe you mentioned the Netherlands at 210 points. The CRTC committed tonight to reevaluating Canadian content. What is your best advice for how Canadian content should be redefined so that it is broader and incorporates far more content?
Well, thanks for the question. And other countries have taken a look at this question and have tried to adapt and bring in some flexibility in terms of taking a look at it. And we talk about antiquated systems, the Broadcast Act. Well, the definition of what Canadian content is equally as antiquated. And there was an overemphasis, quite frankly, of the screenwriter, the director, and the actor. And it didn't take into consideration the fact that it was shot in Canada, that there may be 900, 800 crew on a show, that 95 or 98% of which are Canadian. All of those factors. And the fact that, treating IP as a determinative factor, to me, makes no sense whatsoever. The goal is to protect, to enhance creative Canadian voices in all facets. And not to be restricted by a sole determining factor like IP. This isn't about protecting Canadian media companies. It's about protecting Canadian culture, voices, and stories. And if that's the intent, that's what we should be doing. And I'm very pleased to hear both the words of Minister Rodriguez and I was able to listen to some of the comments earlier today with the CRTC and how they're willing to take on this challenge moving forward. And I think, quite frankly, Peter, it has to be flexible. I think in all of this industry is changing monthly, and let's not get into the situation where whatever we said enshrined today in legislation is it's difficult to change down the road, because we're not going to recognize this industry 5 years from now.
Thank you. I'll have to cut you off on that as I want to get to a couple of other questions. Mr. Sinclair, thank you for your presentation tonight. You mentioned the impact of CanCon, how that helped Tragically Hip. There were Canadian artists that emerged before there was Canadian content, but far fewer. And after we put in place CanCon, a lot more Canadians were able to succeed both in Canada and internationally. Is that what you foresee with C11? That there are some Canadians that are succeeding now, but more Canadians will be able to succeed with the provisions of the bill?
Yeah, that would be my hope. Otherwise, we risk a similar pattern that happened prior to the 70s, where artists that achieved a certain level of success would immediately move south, where they were able to be even more successful and promote a different audience. And that way, we wind up losing our cultural voices, people that actually sing about this country and write about this country, to me, which is a very important part of the continuing heritage of Canada.
Thank you very much. Finally, Sarah Bannerman, you mentioned about the bias around algorithms. Do you find that the algorithms tend to be something that is not transparent? Which adds to the complexity around these issues. We have in the United States, of course, Senator Ed Markey that has presented a bill on algorithm transparency. Is this something that transparency is something you like that you believe is important?
Absolutely. And I think they're not transparent, and there are multiple ways of approaching that. Like an alternative would be an algorithmic transparency act.
I'm sorry, Ms. Bannerman. You've cut off, or you?
No,
is that your answer?
That was my answer. Thank you. I thought time was limited.
Yes, indeed, you're absolutely right. So thank you very much, and thanks, Peter. Your time is up. Thank you for being succinct, Ms. Bannerman. I just wanted to thank the witnesses for waiting for so long to get on, and for spending such an important time trying to get us to understand some of the complexities that we are trying to understand. I want to also especially, and I think I have to do this, thank Mr. Sinclair for spending his time with us today and for being extremely patient. This is an icon, people, and I have to say that we are graced with his presence. Thank you very much, everyone. And I will now accept a motion to adjourn.
So moved, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Adjourned. Goodbye, everyone.